What's up, everybody? I'm David Hain. Welcome to episode number 288 of the A to D from Addict to Disciple podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, please like, subscribe, follow, share the link with your friends, and if you'd like to get our curriculum, you can get the paperback or ebook of From Ashes to Destiny on Amazon. Today's episode, again, number 288 of the A to D from Addict to Disciple podcast, is entitled Addictive Personality. This topic came up several times on my recent South Africa trip, and it came from parents describing their adult children and how they just always seem to be getting in and out of addiction, to men and women in recovery using it as a way to describe their tendency to replace one addiction with another and struggling to just be free of all addictions as they were in recovery. I thought today I better take a look at this topic and give you the clinical aspects of it and also what we do in From A to D when we're working with people. So first, let's start defining it. What does it mean to have an addictive personality? If you look at the dictionaries online, it says you appear to overindulge more than others, or you're incapable of saying no or enough already, I don't want any more. It's sort of described as someone who says too much of a good thing is never enough. But I think it's very important to know right up front, an addictive personality is not a diagnosable disease or condition. That's right. The DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, does not recognize addictive personality disorder as a formal diagnosis. And the Mayo Clinic agrees with that. There's not one single trait that leads to addiction. So the clinical experts are saying this addictive personality is not a trait that says it's going to result in your addiction. And so instead, these clinicians look at a collection of characteristics or environmental factors or health conditions that all go into making a person more prone to developing addiction. But then they also list what are the signs of an addictive personality, again, keeping in mind it's not a clinical diagnosis, it's not a clinically defined disorder, but they're saying, let's look at what we would say makes up an addictive personality. And some of the things they look at are someone who's adventurous or thrill-seeking, or they appear rebellious. Someone who acts on impulses. They don't seem to fit societal norms, and they're viewed as an outsider or a nonconformist. Often they say it's someone who has an attention deficit disorder diagnosis. A characteristic they see as they work with these people is that they tend to have comfort with secrets or telling lies. It's not something that bugs them. Another characteristic is a desire for immediate gratification, and that they can't deal with delayed gratification. They have difficulty accepting responsibility or self-regulation. And they're at ease with risk-taking behaviors. And one of the key things that they found fit a whole lot of the people was that there was an early childhood trauma. So most of these I've taken from a Mayo Clinic health system study called Do You Have Addictive Personality Traits? So again, they're looking at traits that would say, yeah, looks like you have an addictive personality, but again, saying it's not a clinical diagnosis and it's not a disorder that's recognized by the treatment community. So how do you treat an addictive personality? What do they do if someone comes to a clinic and says, I think I've got an addictive personality. I keep going from one addiction to another, to another, to another. And what the clinicians say is the best ways to treat addictive personality involves a combination of things. It involves psychotherapy. It involves family therapy, working with the family of the person involved, both their birth family and their current family if they're an adult, and to get them involved in support groups. The most common type of methodology that they use in therapy is cognitive behavioral therapy. So this means they're working on looking at your thinking, the way you process things and think about things, and then also looking at behavioral modification steps. They've also found that people with addictive personalities often need medications for underlying conditions like depression, bipolar, anxiety, those sorts of things. So what they're really saying is an addictive personality can be an aspect of some of your characteristics, but it's not a disorder. And therefore, it's something that they will work on using psychotherapy, using support groups, using medically assisted treatment for other conditions that may be underlying this addictive characteristic that comes out of you. So, how do we look at it in A to D? I think for me, we tie it into the way we really look at addiction overall, and that is we try to identify a core wound. And what is this core wound that's so deep that's become a core value? And say, if you're going from one addiction to another, if you're showing some of these characteristics that they listed before, like thrill seeking, appearing rebellious, acting on impulses, desire for immediate gratification, difficulty accepting responsibility, that's pretty good evidence to say your core wound hasn't been healed. So whatever this childhood trauma, whatever this wound that you have is that led you to self-medicate in the first place, even if you're in recovery, maybe that wound hasn't been dealt with. And that's why you're substituting other addictions, maybe socially acceptable addictions, to be your self-medication. And I'd like to give a quote by Beth Moore, an American evangelist and author, who said, "My very addictive personality and all sorts of strongholds are a thing of the past for me. Yet at the root of every single one of those issues was insecurity, something I had battled since childhood." So to me, this would be Beth Moore saying, look, I've identified my core wound. I've identified my insecurity as a core value and what caused that insecurity. And I've worked through it. I've processed it. I've broken the hold that it had on me. It's a thing of the past. And therefore, my addictive personality is not an issue anymore. Another thing we look at when we work with someone in A to D is, have you ever processed daily stressors or processed life on life's terms without a drug or a drink? You see, we talk to people who may have started using at a very early age, started drinking or smoking weed as a teenager or even a preteen. And when we talk to them, they say, you know what? I never really have dealt with any emotions, be they sad or happy, without some alcohol or without some weed. So I don't even know if I've processed things as an adult, even though I'm maybe in my 40s right now sitting in front of you. I may still be thinking like a teenager. And there's an anonymous quote which says, "Can't complain when you've got Mary Jane." And this has been popular in the marijuana community as a way to reflect that if you've got weed, life's little complaints seem to fade away. And so this second aspect that we look at in A to D is, has that been you? Have you had weed? Have you had alcohol as the thing that got life's little complaints to fade away? So you've never actually dealt with them at all without drugs or a drink. The third aspect we look is, do you really know how to deal with your emotions or thoughts? Can you see how your thoughts affect your emotions and how your emotions affect your behavior and your choices, your decision-making process? And I think this is best summed up from the Rolling Stones song, Mother's Little Helper from 1966. And I'll just give you a quote from some of the lyrics. What a drag it is getting old. Kids are different today, I hear every mother say. Mother needs something today to calm her down. And though she's not really ill, there's a little yellow pill. She goes running for the shelter of her mother's little helper, and it helps her on her way, gets her through her busy day. So this really ties into the second comment that I said. And in this third aspect, though, it's saying, have you been using a mother's little helper? Have you been using something to just take the edge off, to help you make it on your way, help you get through your busy day? Because things are different than when you were younger, and stressors are different, and they're harder to deal with. And the fourth aspect that we look at as we work with people in A to D is we find that people who say they have this addictive personality really don't even have a way to identify all their stressors, let alone process them. That they haven't really dug into root causes to be able to understand what's going on. And there's a quote from Ann Wilson Schaaf, an American clinical psychologist and author of When Society Becomes an Addict. And in that book, she said, we must move in our recovery from one addiction to another for two major reasons. First, we have not recognized and treated the underlying addictive process. And second, we have not accurately isolated and focused upon the specific addictions. To sum this episode up, it's really saying, do you have the ability and the people to work with you to identify your reason for using in the first place, to identify the root causes, and to understand this addictive cycle and process that you've got caught up in? And then have you isolated and focused on the different addictions that you've substituted with, and see how they are just another way of continuing your self-medication? Remember, it's very difficult to just process stuff all alone, especially if you've never really done that. So I want to encourage you to reach out and join a group. You can get in touch with me by clicking on the link in the podcast. You can contact me by email at davidfroma2d@gmail.com, or go to my website, www.froma2d.org, and click on the contact page. The key is, if you think this fits you, reach out. Keep listening to future podcast episodes, and as always, stay safe and stay resilient.